the context of using AI and machine learning, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about some issues or sorts of things that one needs to keep in mind in how you use AI and machine learning.
So I think for me, what's now interesting about this whole area is now we can like latch onto different aspects and then see, okay, well, how would technology actually today already be able to solve certain problems? Now, obviously, the extent to which it can solve those problems depends on who implemented it, how it's implemented, how it's been integrated, and how it works in the area. So immediately my mind goes to, if you think about a large language model kind of environment, it can go through all those documents, it can summarize it, and at least give you a starting point as to what you should do with it. Wait, let me contextualize this. So machine learning, in its essence, is literally it learns a pattern, and then it can apply that pattern. It's basically a pattern recognition and replication machine, if you want to call it like that. It's literally called a function of got some inputs, it does something, I get output. Okay. Now, if you have a certain way of identifying certain risks, now you can think classically. There should already exist software that can go through documents and can already pick up certain words or certain phrases or certain areas that you can say, listen, this looks like a potential for risk. We normally always, I don't know if you've got a good example.
So for us, let's say indemnity is one, because
yes,
there's a certain legal risk associated with that. So if you buying a company, it's got contracts, and in those contracts, that company is indemnifying other parties for certain types of liabilities or losses, then you want to look into that and identify, okay, where do those exist? Who's the counterparty? And how far-reaching is that indemnity? Like, what are we on the line for? That's a good example.
So that's a beautiful example, because then the system could, in theory, automatically look at those all the indemnities of all the different contracts, identify which ones it deems to be the highest risks and low risks. Maybe somebody was clever somewhere and limited the risk or reduced it in some negotiation, and then maybe in another case another department didn't do anything about it and
someone negotiated better on the other side, or
yes. So the system can identify these areas, and then what it'll help your life with is it'll raise it as to, okay, cool, here's our checklist of things we have to double check and make sure. You can still read it, you can still double check it, but at least the system always, it's like, I like to see it as smart lenses. Like, it puts these lenses on your face where you can almost look at it from a different angle. Or if there's something that you might not have been aware of, this is the other nice thing, is the system goes through and analyzes the documents, and you might not be aware of certain risks. So you might be aware of all the different risks within the commercial sense, but then I don't know if there's maybe a different kind of legal risk or an obscure risk which you haven't dealt with yet, or your team hasn't dealt with it. I don't know if that actually happens, because I actually assume you guys are pretty competent.
Well, you know, most of the types that come up, but I mean,
but
the possibility is there. Yeah.
And then it can just highlight that and say, listen,
here's something different out of the ordinary.
Out of the ordinary.
Okay.
And then you can say, listen, okay, cool, I want to explore that further, or listen, we have to look at that before we can proceed with it.
That's a good point.
We want to double check it.
Because a lot of clauses do follow, the style of it can change, but you know, there's a lot of repetition or pattern, you know, from let's say one drafter style to the next. You will look at the clause and you'll say, I know what type of clause that is. It reads slightly differently, but at the end of the day, it more or less does the same thing. So I think I understand what you mean, because if there's a clause that is out of the ordinary for the program, saying I'm not used to seeing this clause, something different, then you might want to interrogate and say, but what is this clause? Why is it there? Why did someone feel the need to put this sort of unusual clause in? And then you look a bit deeper into that issue.
So in the first case, especially if there's volumes of documents that you have to go through, and I mean, I do understand you still will have to go through them as a matter of being thorough, but there's that first pass of, let's just run the system. It shows us all the different high risk things. We deal with them in the morning when we're fresh, and then we'll read through the rest of it and work through as we go through the day, and I guess become more and more tired through the day. But the beautiful thing about that is, as well as once you have a system that can do that, well, the next steps becomes interesting and almost in some ways easier, because now you've identified all the things that you want to look at. You've identified what you want to put in your draft in terms of how you want to cover for these potential risks. And I've seen startups who've already started building software that this now integrates with your classic Microsoft Word, where it's in the sidebar and it will, well, I mean, okay, let's just take a step back. Right now, you probably have templates. If you, it would be, I'm so stupid not to have templates, but you'll have
Lots of
templates
templates.
and certain ways of saying certain things, and that's built up over many years of dealing with all kinds of variations and all kinds of different cases. And obviously, as a lawyer, you're now trying to fit it to the specific case, and you want to pull from all these cases so that you can focus on the difficult components, and so you can spend a lot of effort and time on that which will benefit the client.
The big issues.
The big issues, that the ones that are like, listen, there's no template for this. It's just a strange one. We have to undo this mess or whatever it may be to make
or
this.
find a novel way to deal with it.
Exactly. So you want to get to as fast as possible, essentially, that point. So now what the system can do is you can see the first layer as templates. You can just pull different templates and you can match it depending on the risk. And you can see a second layer now with the large language models where it can adjust those templates to be contextual to your document that you're trying to create. So it can literally read through your document, and an easy way to imagine this is you've got company A, and company A has got certain specifics and certain details, and it's within, let's say, the tech industry, and then it can start already changing those templates to fit with that company, to fit with that industry, and if it's identified risk, you can start manipulating the words to fit with it. So now you've already got a draft sorted almost automatically, and your next step would be to read through it, start editing it, and start focusing on the bigger issues. And you always have that reference, or if it's implemented correctly, you always have that reference and thread to where is this connected to, which risk is connected to. So that's for me the beauty of where artificial intelligence comes in. And then for me, the future of this whole thing gets to the point where all those different steps can happen automatically. It can even go as far as research on your internal database, go as far as research on your on the master database that's out there, and there's all the core documents, whatever's available. Bring back what it thinks you should be looking at implementing, summarizing it for you, putting it in those clauses for you, and then literally your job becomes, okay,
does this work?
Does this work?
And how
does this
does it
make
work
sense?
well?
And then going through this, I mean, you're always going to double check, like, okay, well, where is this pulling from? Where is this? Does this fit within our context? And then for me, the beautiful thing there becomes learning about something you might not have been aware of. Maybe in your research, after spending a lot of time, you would have come to that same conclusion, but it just speeds up that process for me.
What's interesting is what you're saying about the role of the lawyer going forward. So currently, a lawyer is going to go through the document manually and using the template and making adjustments. So if you've got a system that already speaks to information that you've got on the DD and on the target, and the system can automatically pull some of that detail in onto your template and adjust the template, there's a time saving, but also the role of the lawyer changes because they're not manually making the adaptations. They're now reviewing the clauses in the context of what they know about the DD, and they're seeing if the changes to the clauses or the way that the clause reads speaks to the way that they see the transaction. So either it's going to be in line with the way, and they say, yes, I agree with how the clause reads, or the lawyer can go further and say, no, it needs to be changed a bit here, or I want to add something in there. But the point is there's a time saving for the lawyer and for the client. It makes the process efficient, but the lawyer is not moving into a different role.
A different role, 100%. So for me, it's thinking about it. He becomes or she becomes more strategic and more thinking about the bigger picture, more problem solving, less editing, less do I have the right words
for each and every clause, or for example, and focusing on the big issues, the big clauses.
So I'm going to draw two parallels. So the first parallel is think like what would work for a writer today is to have like your GPTs and your LLMs as a co-writer to when you're writing a piece of like a book. And I would still do my research. I would still provide my own experience, but then I would use the AI system to talk to it, to give me ideas, to reframe and rephrase what I ask it to do. One of the we internally use in our marketing a specific tool that helps us rephrase words. So you say, this is my sentence, and it gives you all kinds of different options, slightly nuances, slightly different context, but different ways of saying the same thing. And many times you're like, oh wait, this is a much better way of saying it.
That you still choose at the end of the day.
That you still choose at the end of the day, and you believe, like, I mean, my English is not the best. Like, suddenly I can write at a much better level just because now I'm using a tool. So my level of competence increases. Now, in the same sense, if you have a model trained on all of the IP that you as that say Worksmans as a legal firm has built up over all the years, then this model essentially talks like a Worksman's person because it's got all that context.
The style,
the way, the information that's inside of it. So now a new lawyer, a junior lawyer, could actually be as competent as the most senior lawyer using a tool, because it can just leverage all of that information that it already exists. It can say, listen, okay, cool, I've got this clause. How would I reframe this, or how would I rephrase this, or how do I solve this specific problem? And then, being the fact that you have this system which has that, I'm going to call it memory, for lack of a better word, it can just apply that inside of the specific context. And it's interesting because a lot of management consultants are now doing research as to, does it make them more competent or not? And 2 weeks ago, there is a management consultancy which did this, which showed that a big portion of the experiment now of people performed 40% better than not. Now, I don't know what exactly the tasks were that they were going to do, or how they framed or how exactly the experiment operated. But what's interesting for me about that is, and what I've seen in some of the tools that we've developed, I almost want to say the median performance of the teams shift. Because, I mean, you always get good performance in certain areas, and so, for example, one lawyer might be very good at building relationships, another lawyer might be very good at the technical detail of specific legal aspects, or specific, say, for example, company law, or whatever it may be. Like, it might be like very focused, but not really a people person. So you get different skill sets. But now imagine you can have almost the skill set of this person at your fingertips, implementing and editing and drafting for you, and it can actually go as far as say, listen, you pull up a whiteboard, you analyze all the problems, you think out loud, and as you're thinking out loud and telling the system, it starts transcribing it, and then after it's been transcribed, you just say, listen, okay, now can you put it into those phrases or within this agreement for me,
into a better style, and
starts changing it. So I don't think that can happen right now, because I think that whole process of linking and how to link it and so on is something I haven't seen that yet, but all the components are there. The transcribing what I say is really good these days. It's so good, in fact, that, for example, even this recording is something we can transcribe, and we can, within like 10 minutes, have a beautifully written article about the content that we're talking about right now, for example. But that can be translated into something actionable. It can be translated and then into an agreement which you can then take on further. So it's that whole, everything changes. And for me, one of the fundamentally interesting things here is, if a legal firm, such a big enough legal firm, climbs onto this bandwagon and builds the system using all their historical information, they will have a competitive advantage, because all of that information then creates their competitive advantage. Because why? Because it's all encapsulated in the system. If a new or smaller firm wanted to compete with that firm, it would be very hard, because they don't have all that history built into their system. But the flip side is, if a big provider of legal information starts to build a platform that's available to all legal firms, it kind of evens the playing field in some way. But I would still think that a big legal firm with their specific context, with their specific message, will be able to outperform. But it's something that's more theoretical. It would be interesting to see what happens.
But I think the main thing that you're saying is the direction of where it's going is that direction where like in most industries, there is more use of AI or machine learning towards which is applied in the provision of the service. And like you said, the tools are there. So the analytical tools, how there's programs that go through documents or that can make suggestions with wording, all of that exists. It's just a question of how it's going to become, let's say, improved or optimized in a integrated way, that all the different inputs can come in and then through a whole, let's say, transaction process. And that's what you think is going to happen then.